So this is going to be a bit interactive amongst ourselves and hopefully for the people here. Um, this is a roundtable discussion. So what we plan on doing is covering a bit of the history of interventions so that you understand the context of why we approach interventions in the way we do. Um, then we're going to go discussing our collaborative approach and the elements that are involved. We're going to look at mental health considerations, and then we're going to have some composite case studies that we've all worked on together or separately, and a chance for people to interact. So don't feel comfortable jumping in. So
There's a history of interventions and even the names by which these different interventions would have been called. Going back to the programming, if anyone attended the talk yesterday of programming gone wrong, very wrong. The term deprogramming was coined in the 70s during the emergence of cults and new religions. Ted Patrick, often referred to as a father of deprogramming, played a significant role in its development. He became involved with the programming after his son joined a group called the Children of God. Patrick founded organizations such as Free Cog, and later the Citizens Freedom Foundation, which provided deprogramming services. His methods often involved abduction, forced confinement, physical restraint, and sleep deprivation. So not a advised system of freeing someone from a destructive cult. Patrick and others in the field justified the programming by claiming that the cult members were brainwashed and incapable of independent thought. This approach was often coercive and controversial, leading to legal challenges and convictions against families and the programmers. Early on, what to some old timers have told us, groups such as Children of God eventually allowed parental access, even visits to the group, until a number of parents were successful in convincing their adult children to leave the group. Then some groups began severely restricting parental access. In the mid 70s, parents began reporting their adult children's involvement in new religions and some non religious groups that many call cults. They reported rapid personality changes, concerns that their loved ones were dropping out of school, shunning previous friends and family, and devoting themselves full time to working for these strange new groups to which they pledged their total allegiance. Many parents concluded that their children had been brainwashed. Parents were doing what they could to rescue their children from what were perceived as dangerous situations. And in those days, there weren't many options being offered. So when a person would come and ask a parent who was struggling with a similar issue, the advice to them was, you need to get a deprogrammer stat right away. Don't waste your time. So through trial and error, the controversial process of deprogramming developed. In the 70s, it became the preferred means of rescuing a cult member. As to many, it was perceived as the only way a cult member could leave a cult. You were snapped into the group through various processes, mind control and environmental control. And the only way to get out would be a sudden shift of mind by pulling you completely out of the environment where the control had taken place.
And one of the first famous cult books was called Snapping.
Yeah, right.
I remember it. So it's right from the language there. Snapping was one of the first books I could find on cults back in the 80s.
And there were some gems of knowledge in that book, along with
It was helpful.
a lot of distortions.
It's probably not printed anymore, but it's probably was version. Oh, is there a second version of Snapping? Oh my gosh, I want to get that. Oh, in the 90s. Okay. Okay.
As we witness today, this is a misperception as thousands of cult members walk away from cults annually. In fact, in very unofficial polls taken at conferences at ICSA recovery workshops, the majority of former members were walkaways. But at the time, families based their decisions on the prevailing information. A significant part of that decision was based on the fact that in some groups, members were zealously protected from their parents, often having their names changed and being moved from location to location. So simultaneously, this history existed where groups were encouraging members who joined the groups that not be found and to do everything they could to prevent their parents from ongoing communication. We must add here that not all the programmings were rescue and hold situations. There were some where the group member was free to leave at any time, and there were some where ex-members sought voluntary deprogramming. However, for our purposes today, we will use the terms deprogramming to refer to an involuntary situation, exit counseling to denote a voluntary situation, and thought reform consultation to describe a different approach. We will seek to explain differences and their history. Over time, the practice of deprogramming faced increasing scrutiny and including its effectiveness, ethical implications, and harm. The decline of involuntary deprogramming in the United States was significantly influenced by legal cases and court rulings that emphasized individual rights and religious freedom. Gradually, not only did the understanding of the process of thought reform grow, but the voluntary approach of exit counseling proved to be effective and less risky, psychologically as well as legally. A few individuals committed themselves to offering exit counseling and refused to do what would be called involuntaries. Even within the field of exit counseling, further specialization has occurred. Some tend to be technique-oriented and or advance particular religious perspective. Others are information-centered. Exit counseling emerged as a non-coercive alternative focusing on voluntary participation and providing information to help individuals make informed choices. Did you have something to add, Rosa?
No, it's gonna, but it might be on the slide. The ethical part of exit counseling, right? That's the big part. The big change from deprogramming to exit counseling was this ethical dimension, right? That you guys and Carol really pioneered.
Because prior to sort of the process that we've developed, it's a little bit more systematized and teachable. It was a free zone, people doing whatever they wanted to do. And so when parents were afraid of their what with their loved one would happen to them, they would reach out, and depending on what cowboy they interacted with, it would have its own life. And that could be very kind and gentle, and it also could be very extreme. A friend of mine who went to the same university I did was kidnapped from the university, totally unnecessary. Parents could have called the university and they would have kicked her out. She was taken away, and they thought that for her to make sure she was out, she would have to lose her virginity, which they offered that service to her. So the screams were phenomenal.
But even you and Carol did this whole level of standards, like ethical standards that therapists would have, that ethical standards for exit counselors.
Well, just so you know, I introduced the social work code of ethics into that group. Cool. So that was my contributions.
The ethical standards were developed with Carol,
Vanessa.
myself, Joe Zimhart, Vanessa,
So it was a group.
Margaret Singer,
Yeah.
and that was published in the Cultic Studies Journal.
Garvey.
Huh?
And Kevin Garvey.
Kevin Garvey in 1992. And there was a lot of controversy that we were establishing these ethical guidelines.
The other thing I'd add is exit counseling chapter in the clinical book that Carol wrote. That's also a more current explanation of this field.
So this field of doing interventions is sort of mysterious. People didn't exactly know what was going on. If there was 100 interventionists, there was 100 different approaches. And what we've tried to do is systematize and make it teachable for a good part of this. And so since we systematized it, at least the early part to the intake level, we've been able to start teaching other people to do this. So our collaborative approach is we'll be focusing on our collaborative approach on the elements. This is based upon our philosophy that we want to help families and friends understand and effectively respond to the complexities of group involvement, controlling relationships, and other sort of cultic environments. Our approach is based upon this philosophy and emphasizes careful strategy, education, and awareness using modern norms. And we don't start with the assumption that group involvement is harmful for everyone. Nor do we assume that the individual responds to the same group differently. The group that I was involved in, there are 10 million members. Of those 10 million, they're not in a cult. There's 40,000 of us who are teachers, who strengthened on meditation, much more chance we're in a cult. And then there's those who went through the university system, a bigger chance we're in a cult. So there is the same group, very different experiences. So the term cult has been used and is helpful for many people, for many members. It's a term that could help a person make sense of their group experience. But for others, it's not helpful. Labeling the group as a cult can be a barrier to seeking reevaluation resources and support. Many years ago at the University of Pennsylvania, we had we were doing a family workshop. And at that family workshop, we were discussing the term cult. And one of the people said, it's absolutely necessary. We have to label things for what they are. And I looked around and I said, how many former members of the Unification Church are here? And there was one. And I said, how many members, former members of the Unification Church exist? And there's probably 500,000. So there was a barrier because they didn't see their experience in that term. That became a barrier for that group of people. But for other people, it was something that would coalesce around. It made sense. So both are true. So we're going to talk about, what happens when people contact us. So there's an initial contact, and usually that is a phone call or an email. And a family wants to tell us, my kid's at a cult. What can we do? Is this a cult? And what we try to do is not answer those questions because we don't want to steer the concerned person, because we might have a lot of influence upon them. We don't want to steer them into an idea. But what we want to do is to get information by filling out a comprehensive intake questionnaire so that we could share that intake with our colleagues from different disciplines. So the initial contact, usually we try to limit to 5-10 minutes until we've gone through they've sent us their intake process. So often the first contact is by phone or email. Frequently the parent is concerned, just repeating what I said, that the loved one has joined a cult. They frequently attribute the difficulties they perceive as being a result of cult involvement. In our approach, we don't assume that, nor do we assume that groups are harmful. So when the family we send them this intake form, which is 64 questions and a lot of categories. If we can get categories.
84.
Huh?
84 questions.
We'll look at some of those categories that we are asking. And these categories tend to be what a psychiatrist would be interested in seeing, a social worker, a therapist. And so as a team, when the person contacts us, we bring them to a questionnaire. The questionnaire, once it's received back, we have them fill out releases that we could share the information amongst our colleagues. Our colleagues then evaluate this initial intake. So the initial intake has some elements. You want to talk about them? Joe?
The intake questionnaire, our comprehensive intake questionnaire, consists of 84 questions, ensuring a thorough understanding of the case and providing a strong foundation for the evaluation process. The questionnaire provides basic information that helps both mental health professionals and cult specialists assess the case. There's demographic information, name, basic identifying principles, age, gender, contact information, where they're living in the group, in their own housing, living at home with family members, and the social support that's available, friends and family who might be helpful if pursuing an intervention. Family history, the relevant medical and mental health history. Is there a parental relationship, current and past relationships, including dynamics and any relationship difficulties that have arisen? The parental relationships, the impact of childhood relationships and current functioning, parenting and children, if applicable, informed information about children's health, social services involvement, and living arrangements. The education level, financial situation and employment status, the history of substance abuse, whether drugs and alcohol are a factor, mental and physical health, Coping mechanisms, stress management techniques. What strategies does the individual normally use to cope with stress and difficult situations? The cultural and spiritual beliefs of the family, influence of cultural background in individuals' beliefs and behaviors, spiritual beliefs, impact of the spiritual or religious beliefs, risk assessment, safety concerns, exploring potential risks like suicidal thoughts, self-harm or violence, protective factors, identifying resources and supports that can promote safety and well-being.
Well, this is a rather involved intake. Many families don't want to give this don't want to give this information. And for us, that sense is a filtering of people who are just curious or people that really want to identify the issue. And it's the information we think that we need to fully begin our assessment team.
And often, and this is where I think this is what Rosanne was just talking about, a very ethical piece. They ask me or a psychiatrist to look it over and maybe done an initial talk with the family just to make sure that there aren't, some severe mental illness such as schizophrenia or suicidality or something that would really put the person at risk for doing any kind of intervention. It's just a quick initial thing, but it's very important. And I know they reach out to a psychiatrist as well.
So once this form comes back, the last area of our intake form are releases, which gives us permission to share the information with our colleagues. And then they also have to give our colleagues permission to talk back to us. So we want to respect the ethical guidelines the therapists have.
We see just a touch more when you said we don't see the difficulties as necessarily attributed to the cause. Like, how do you tease that out when the parents first call?
So when the parents first call, they'll say, my kid is in a cult and this is the problem. And they may well be in what we would call a cult or a high demand group, but it also can be, I worked on a case that their son came out as gay and the person that he was in relationship with, they blamed for making him gay. So we have to sort this out. Is that the case? It could have been, but it wasn't. There's a variety of people who contact us with so many different problems. We just want to make sure that this is what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And even if it's a group that we know, we don't assume just because someone learned transcendental meditation that they're having a cultic relationship with. So we want to hear what they have to say.
Often people, you say this all the time, people want to put all the problems into the cult basket.
Yeah.
And it's never that way, quite honestly. I kind of see it as a pie, a pie shaped. And, it certainly there's often, the undue influence may be the largest piece of the pie, but it may just be a little sliver too. And that's really what the assessment is all about, trying to figure out how much is family dynamics, for example, or health issues or something like that, and undue influence. And they often converge, to make the situation as it is. But that's really a very, very crucial piece.
So that's just the first contact,
Yeah.
5-minute phone call. I just want to add one more thing about the last release that we ask families. They can choose to go along with it or not go along with it. And that is they allow their case to be used for future research. So since 1992, we've used the same intake, the same process. And so if a researcher wants to look and validate or find problems or improve the approach we've developed, the cases have already given us permission up front.
Dealing with the issue, the deeper issue helps us be able to help that individual leave a group by understanding that dynamic, what's really going on for them.
Yeah.
So
In a way, that's the prescription for the treatment, exactly that. Yeah.
So the family has contacted us, they filled out this intake form, and then we share the intake form with permission with the intervention team, like people like Joe, myself, Ashton Hilliard, and other people who work with us. We also share it with the mental health professionals that are going to evaluate the case, give us input. If there are signs of mental illness, we frequently go right to a psychiatrist who will also review it. Look, they're not diagnosing, they're just giving us their opinion on the case. Is it something that maybe they should take over right away or not take over? And so we defer to a mental health professional. Are we even appropriate for what's being described? And sometimes we also have a former member review the process. So after that comes together, we can have a conversation, a Zoom meeting amongst ourselves, and determine if we think we should move to the next step, which is to talk to the family. And we say 30 minutes, but it's usually 60 minutes to an hour, hour and a half, listening to them and then giving our initial impressions. Are we even appropriate for this situation?
That's why our collaborative approach is so helpful, in that we have mental health professionals review the case, and they're advising on, yeah, there's some other dynamic going on here that you need to look at even before you'll have a chance to discuss a cultic issue. And if the family's willing to engage with that process with help, then we can often move that process forward and look at the issue of the problematic group.
So after this conversation with the family, our next step is to assess the case. And this assessment process takes between 18 and 15 hours.
Yeah.
And so this is a really now step from you talk to Joe, Pat, Doni, Rachel, and other people, Rosanne, and other people in our team. We've given them our ideas. And then if they want advice from us, we need to assess the case, assess the situation. So the 8 to 15 hours, the variable deals with because the number of people that we might want to interview. So if there's 10 family members that are concerned, we want to have individual interviews with each of those people. And we want, in many cases, we want a mental health professional to do those interviews.
Yeah, because one of our skills, mental health people are really trained in interviewing and, helping people lower their defenses so that they reveal a lot of what's going on. And we have found some very interesting things that we wouldn't have without people feeling very comfortable to disclose secrets in the family, things like that, that we wouldn't have known otherwise. So that's, very important. And we get to hear the dynamics. I mean, what mother will say, oh yeah, we were a very close family. We share everything. And then you talk to the kids and, it's not like that at all. So that piece is very important, those individual.
I think with that dynamics that you're that would be a different situation. If we're dealing with intervention or mediation when someone who's concerned about someone.
I mean, you've by then gotten over the use of the word cold, and you've enjoined the concept that there's something wrong with the group I'm involved in. So they might come to ICSA first and reach out there if they're not afraid of that term.
So the assessment, we're interviewing each of the family members who are concerned, and we frequently ask each of them to fill out our intake form so we can see the different points of view. We're intervention is interfering with someone's life without their permission, because that's what it is. And if you're going to interfere with someone's life without their permission, we really want to know that we're doing it for the proper reasons, that it is not just blaming some group for the problems that are pre-existing. They can be contributing factors also, but that's part of our approach. And in the assessment, we also have about a 3-hour section for everyone that's involved, that are concerned, education on the nature of groups, the nature of recovery, things that can be factors that could interfere with a success of an intervention. So we want to, and case examples of interventions we've done, so that this family as a whole, or those who are concerned, get a sense of what we're doing. And then we want to figure out what we know from what we've received and what we might need to know, information that we haven't received. And then once we've got all of that information together, we then about a week to 10 days after we've done this assessment, this 8 to 15-hour adjustment, we then give our recommendations. So we've taken the information, we've talked to everyone. As a team, we come back, we discuss what's our process. And the recommendations could be just wait and see. We're not appropriate. Therapy, sending people to support groups, maybe just coaching a family, possibly preparing for some type of mediation where they could sit down with somebody who has a background in different religious systems and can bring resolution to the problems, or potential intervention. So that's the major parts of our sort of overall process that we're working through. Do you want to talk about some of the mental health issues? And then at some point, we're going to go to some case examples, and we can start throwing things out to us. It is expensive process. You know, a lot of people involved. What we're in the past, when we saw the programming, and if anybody saw any of these programs on the programming, it was frequently families were asked to advance $25,000 to $50,000 to do with the programming. So this is much less expensive. I think that to get through our assessment process on average probably costs about $7,500.
I do want to say, you do slide us.
Yes.
See, I mean, have asked me that, they've told me this is a family that really needs us, blah, blah, blah. Will you take it for a little bit less? And I've done it, so we do try, and I know they do as well. But yes, it's expensive. I did want to add one other piece also. I'm really focused in on this ethical stuff. When they do the assessment, if it does not seem like this is the right time to go forward, they will say we shouldn't go forward.
Yeah.
Which is very ethical, because they could very well say, oh yeah, let's do the intervention, and that's another several $1,000s. They don't do that. They say, no, this isn't the right time. Let's just wait and see and hold,
Fundamental to that is our sort of philosophy of doing no harm. Because ultimately, if you're in a group, maybe you may have friends, but there are people that you can come out to, about your family or close friends, and we want to make sure that they're not removed from the process. And in our model, we believe that group experience, if it's group, is like this. It's the best thing I've ever experienced. I really can't say I got to get out of here. I love it. I got to get out of here. This is perfect. This is what I've always wanted to do. No, I don't want to do. It's up and down. And the way that I know that you can find out where someone is in that cycle is that you have to have a relationship with them.
So relationship may require you being recruitable, meaning able to listen to the doctrine, to understand exactly where they are. So if they trust you that you're listening to them with the newfound joy in their life, then they may trust you when they're in a low moment in relationship to the group or somebody in the group who's bothersome. Otherwise, you'll have no gauge other than that everything's great. My life has never been better. And that's the only, you're getting a distorted lens as opposed to a really clear picture of where your loved one may be at any given moment. Did you have a question?
In that, so if in sort of the group life cycle, many groups, and look, we're talking generically, have holidays. And the example I might use is I was raised a Catholic kid. So if I was going to explain to my siblings what's wrong with Catholicism, I would not do it in December, because they're on automatic. They're buying gifts. They're doing all kinds of things, preparing meals, whose house this is going to be at. The 20th of January, when the credit card bills come due, a little better time. So that is the group sort of life cycle, where we are in the cycle. And then the individual in that group, what's going on in their head? Do they like it there or not like it there? Do they can't stand it, but they don't know how to tell anyone. They don't think there's help on the other side. So families are often, my child is going to come home next Thursday. Can you talk to them? That's access. And access is important, but what's more important in my mind is are they in the right frame of mind to be receptive to talking to us? That's the most important thing. If we know that a person is receptive to examining ideas, that doesn't mean, hey, we're going to go talk and debate my things. But if they've had some bad experiences or difficulties in the group, that might be a better time. Not when they're going to be getting on a trip or taking an advanced course or excited about something.
Or if the family's going to be hammering away or has hammered away at them with what they've read on Reddit or Quora, and they want to share this information that they consider essential to their loved one's knowledge base as far as their decision to stay in the group or leave it. So the family has its priorities, but the group member, has different priorities, and we have to try to balance that out in order to offer them the best opportunity for hearing a new way of viewing their group attachment.
Yeah, that's
Yes, and reading tea leaves.
yeah. But they've earned it by 30 years of experience. That's how they read.
You can almost
Is
look
that
at a circumstance at this point, and you can see where the difficulties are going to lie, where the hidden monsters are at the family system, and what might likely get in the way.
In the process of the assessment, when we start giving our recommendations, if we're moving in the direction of intervention or mediation, we're doing lots of testing along the way. So we might have a family bring up a particular subject, see how the person responds to those ideas. We want to test our theory. So essentially, we develop a theory of a case, and then we want to test that theory
With the help of our colleagues and the mental health professionals who look at it from a family systems or other perspective, and share that with us so that we can.
If anybody was at our talk the other day, we talked about sort of what research tells us, and that's about 90% of people who join groups or affiliate leave them, and they leave them on their own. It's just a matter of when. And so we have that in mind. Most group involvement is not life and death. There is Jonestown, there is Heaven's Gate. There are horrible groups that we want to act very quickly upon because we know that the group is very dangerous. I'm working with a group called 764, which children are being abused. It's it's a horrible group. That requires an action. They don't have the luxury of what we're talking about. I don't contact ever a person in a group. Never. For me, it's never. Now, mental health has a different view on that.
I have done it. I've had a situation, yeah, where the parent said, "Oh, he'll never talk to you. He'll never talk to you." So I wrote him an email, and within an hour, he called me, and he wanted to talk to me. I mean, he wanted to make it clear that he didn't want contact with his parents.
Right.
But he was willing to talk to me, and I got a whole different perspective of what was going on in the family and all of that. So.
As interventionists, not our position to do that. As mental health professional, it's a different standard. You may intervene. We're considering ideology, how the group functions, groups that if a family brings up any negativity, they're often shunned. So reaching out to them in those cases probably wouldn't be advantageous.
So I want to address three pieces that I think the mental health is the most involved with. And that is the assessment of the family, complicating factors when we feel that when we feel that mental health issues are more than average and need more mental health insight and advice. And then the last part would be around cult recovery and explaining to the family as well as hopefully the ex-member what's normal and what to expect and how that works. So back to the family assessment. So my background's marriage and family therapy, and I've always looked in my graduate program as cults as pathological family systems. And that really has fit for me in my 30 years experience in the field, that's really what's happening. And so we're assessing families. We're assessing families that are healthier, and we're trying to assess the ability of someone in a pathological family system to come back to a quote more normal family system. And we know there's complications with that. And so we need to be careful about evaluating what is a cult and what is psychopathology and what are dysfunctional family dynamics and what is addiction. And it's like, I'm telling you, it's an ongoing moment by moment, day by day evaluation. And how does it manifest? And, when we work together as a team, it's like, this is happening. What does that mean? And we have to kind of leave it open because we don't know until it's revealed. I mean, in a way, Pat and Joe, it's like Salvador Minuchin sitting with someone with an eating disorder, watching them eat a meal. That's kind of what they do. They move in with the family in a certain way because they spend a lot of time with the family. So they see things that a family therapist, they come to me and they just report the good things, right? We therapists, they report the good things. Well, to me, they do. And Pat and Joe are with them enough that they get to see the wear and tear and what's really going on quicker. But then they don't quite know what to make of it sometimes. And we're always asking, is this cult? Is this not cult? What is this? What's driving this? How could we want to be realistic and we want to be as close to reality as possible so we can be effective? So,
If we all
yes.
say your proper name, just to jump in there. When you go physically live with a family,
No, they don't physically. I'm saying this as a joke.
but if we,
Like that, though, from a therapist perspective, you think they moved in. That's why I gave the example of Salvador Minuchin and the eating disorder. It's like they are with the family much more than I am. And I've done several interventions with them or mediations. And I go, wow, that's a new one. And that wasn't reported to me. And wow, this is important. Okay. And then I'll get some things that they don't get. And so the team benefits from both of those perspectives. But yeah, I'm joking when I say that, but it feels that way from a therapist perspective, how they operate.
just, when those recommendations, therapy, wait and see, intervention, if we're moving toward intervention, the next step in our process is 24 hours, over 3 days with a family.
Yeah, that's what I'm telling you.
3-hour sessions.
3 hours a day with a family. Can you imagine this with your clients? Oh my God. It's like, so that's what I'm saying is like,
At their house.
yeah, well, where they decide.
Ideally, we want to see where the person lives, how do they function, because if we meet their loved one, the family has to be comfortable with us, and that will read. We want to know the rules, the culture of the family. Do you go to the refrigerator and help yourself, or you don't go to the refrigerator and help? So do you take your shoes off? You don't take the shoes off. There's certain chairs you sit in, you don't sit in. We want to understand, how does that family function? Because
So they're looking at through their eyes how the family is functioning, and they get those larger glimpses. But as a clinician, I get shorter glimpses, and the kinds of things I'm looking at are obvious things, but physical, psychological. It's like we're evaluating how the family functions and also trying to sort out their relationship with the cult-involved loved one. Okay, so I want to understand their boundaries, psychological, physical boundaries with the members of the families and with the parents and the children. How has that operated over time and how is it operating today? And again, we don't have the cult affected loved one in there in the beginning, of course, but we have other family members, like we'll have a sister there, like I'll be part of the family prep and we'll really watch the family happen. And I mean, how they interact. And so you're looking at these boundaries, kind of who's in charge, how are problems handled. I always want to know who are the kind of decision makers and who gets to make decisions and who's not to make decisions, or who makes good decisions or bad decisions. So authority is a big one. And as a cult survivor, that's critical to understand how that works. Boundaries are a big one. Communication is huge. And so how do they talk to each other? What is the relationship like between the cult involved loved one and the family? And of course, they're already evaluating who's the key person to talk to, who's going to be able to be the most direct with the cult affected loved one. Will it be the sister? Will it be the grandmother? Will it be Uncle Joe? Will it be the neighbor? Whoever is part of this team, because they gather the critical people in a team and they work with it's kind of preparing for the intervention, but it's also kind of like family therapy in a certain way. And you're shoring up what they have, but you're also, first of all, evaluating what's there and most importantly, what's not there.
Rosanne,
Yes.
we're at our break time.
Yeah.
We'll
Okay.
continue in 15 minutes, and the focus of that is Rosanne. Rachel, Rosanne.
Maybe Rachel is my new name.
Yeah. Continue, and then we're going to present some case studies, some cases that we've worked on together. And we
We're on by the rules with the break.
we got our timing a little off in terms of we went a bit over. So we got 15 minutes left and then we're done.
Thought we had more.
So, Rosanne, formerly known as Rachel, will be here afterwards. You can talk, but Donnie's going to present one of the cases we worked together that did not lead to an intervention through our process.
Okay, and this is very minimal, but okay, so this was, and of course, everything is, all the demographics have changed. You should not be able to recognize this family. They lived in Utah. They were Mormon family. One of the key pieces was the mother was a very high powered CEO of a big corporation, and that was a big key. It was a very religious family. They were concerned that their son had gotten into a one of these hypermasculine groups, and
Masculinity.
masculinity group. Yeah. And was cutting off contact, didn't want anything to do with them. Let's see. Anything else about?
Yeah, the mother
Okay.
knew their son was in this cult, and she also began doing legal action against the group, publicity against the group. She went full bore.
Yeah. One of the things we discovered that was important was the dad was having a lot of affairs. And so this kid didn't have any real good role models. And that was probably one of the reasons why he sought out this, very masculinity group to get, and actually what happened was he did go into it for a while, but once he realized, that it was a bit crazy, he actually left and went into real therapy, good therapy. So, but again, we didn't know that initially. And this was the case that actually I was referring to before, that I was able, even though the family claimed that he would never talk to me, he called me right away. And that's how I discovered, that he actually was doing very well. He just needed to get away from his family for two reasons. I'm going to just go off the script. The two reasons. One, he didn't have a good role model for a father for a man. And so that's what led him to that group. But the other piece was his mother was very, very controlling. Very controlling. She was used to running a corporation. And she was, so he I often find, by the way, that people go from one very controlling parent to another very controlling situation because it feels familiar. I actually have a case right now where it feels familiar. Okay. And they think they're emancipating and individuating from the family, which they're doing, but they're going right back into another, very dependent situation.
I might note that in we did an assessment. The siblings had filled out our intake forms, but did not reveal the father's affairs or the difficulties with mom. It wasn't until Doni was able to interview one of the siblings, this one sibling knew that the brother was no longer involved.
Now, when I was able to talk to this boy, it turned out he was having lots of conversations with his siblings. He made it very clear to me that he didn't want any more contact with his parents, but he was happy to have contact with his siblings and they had a good relationship. So, so that was.
This goes to that when we start off, we don't assume the person is in a group. We don't start off with that assumption or that the group is bad, because in this particular case, somewhere probably 18 hours into working with a family, we discover he's not in a group.
There was another piece to this too, that I kind of was able to bring down the temperature of the parents. He had gotten into a psychodrama group, And the mother had somehow found out about that, and she was irate. This is crazy therapy, blah, blah, blah. But I did assure her that psychodrama was considered, a reputable form of therapy. Of course, it did depend on who was doing it, and I had no way of knowing that. But, that calmed her down a little bit. And that I think is, another reason for mental health people to be involved, because we can sometimes bring, dial it back a little bit, calm people down.
And I would say that I know this field from being in it. Had when we developed this approach in about 92, prior to this, we would have just assumed this was a group and we go try to talk to this guy. And likely it would have exacerbated the problem.
So I don't think there's anything else we want to. We're so sort of time we didn't realize. So
You want to do, Ben? You want to do that case? Okay,
This is a family.
good case.
Sorry, folks.
Because of a family about their son's involvement with an empowerment group. They believed it had overtaken his life and his career path, with the mother and siblings thinking that his choices had been influenced by the group. Just so that the group was self-actualization, the family lived in Texas, the family is Jewish, the mother and father are both executives with a marketing company. And during the interviewing process, we found out that the son was struggling with having goals. He was in the last semester of school at a university. The siblings indicated that he may be having OCD, but he continues to communicate with the sibling. The parents had long-standing issues with their marriage. The siblings suspect that the father may have had affairs, and this background also contributed to the son's involvement in this particular group.
So,
And this is a composite.
okay. So basically, well, the other part of how they work is they're good cop, bad cop. Is this routine right here. And of course, this is the good cop and this is the bad cop. And I'll put it bluntly. That's job was manage the mother, okay, so that the intervention could happen. Because, well, you did family prep, and the sister turned out to be extremely useful and actually did most of the work. They really worked with the sister, and then the sister was able to really be very direct with the brother. And they had a good team, but honestly, half of the intervention was Joe talking to the cult involved loved one and Pat taking a walk with mom. I swear to God, that was the secret. That was your secret sauce right there. And, there's more to it, but that's some of the dynamic that happened. I was involved in the beginning of the case. I'm not there during the intervention. I'm there before, and I'm part of the family prep. And also as you can tell, the assessment is like 3/4 of what they do almost. It's so important that we understand what's going on so we know how to operate.
After this particular case we're talking to, we went to a 3-day preparation with the family,
Yes.
having them refine their concerns. In that process, most people don't like it, but they paid us a substantial amount of money. We arrive, and the first thing we ask them to do is to come up with 50 positive items about their loved ones' involvement in this particular group.
They have to understand that this is a strategic advantage for them, that we're trying to cobble together a dialogue. If we enter with only criticisms of the group, we've lost the member right away. So if the family can think in terms of what might be positive to their loved one in the group, then there is a point of joining in conversation. And that becomes an essential first step.
So this first exercise of having them come up with what they like, because we want someone to see it through their loved one's eyes. What can they enjoy and agree with? And then in the second day of the preparation, we ask them to come up with the 50 reasons why they feel they have the right to interfere with their loved one's life without their permission or their dislikes. And we want to understand what their concerns are. And what we want to do is we wanted to refine those concerns so that the person can hear them. So in a particular case, if mom says you're not getting, he's not getting a job, he's not working, his career is going down the hole. We talk to the sister, and the sister says, he has his own goals, and mom has been directing him his whole life, and he hates it when she brings that up. So we know that's not a productive area of conversation. So we want to refine their concerns so that we understand what are productive conversation, what is not productive conversation, what's going to kick in resistance, and what's not going to kick in resistance. It's difficult for especially other interventionists because they're used to a style. And that style is frequently assuming that because of the name of the group that there's a problem and that group is the problem. And that's how we all came into this field. And moving to the idea that we're not going to assume that, we want to make sure we understand how it affects the person. And, I keep on going back, we're interfering with someone's life, and we have to make sure we're doing it for the right reasons, and there's a safe place for that person to come home. The last thing that you want to do is help someone leave something, and then they go home to fighting, bickering, whatever what those situations. Do they have a job?
That's where the family therapists come in to help the family prepare for that eventuality.
Yeah.
If the person leaves the group, what are they coming back to?
So this is the collaboration of the two. Doni had
Go ahead.
wanted just to mention a few other like tidbits of a case. Tidbits. So I worked on a case many years ago with a family from an Asian country. Their son was a member of the Church of Scientology, and they really didn't care about that until their daughter wanted to get married, his sibling. And the reason they then cared about it is because in their particular country and at their particular status in society, the potential suitor for their sister, would have a background check done on the family to make sure there was no dishonor in the family. And their brother's involvement with his Church of Scientology would be considered a dishonor, and thus the daughter would not be able to achieve the kind of marriage that she should achieve. That was their motivation. So we did talk to this young man, and what we found out was his motivation for being in the Church of Scientology, which was quite fascinating to me. His reason for being in the Church of Scientology is because he did not know how sex worked. He joined the church when he was 17, when he got out of essentially a school, didn't go to college because he did not understand. He knows there's this thing called sex, but how does it work? And when the recruiter from the Church of Scientology said, you'll learn everything. And so he was in Scientology, but he wasn't getting what he wanted was, how does sex work? Our intervention was very short. As soon as we talked to him, met him, he identified what his issue was. So our colleague took him into another room for 3 or 4 hours and explained how sex works. And that was the end of it, because that's why he was in.
Well, that helping them is an external control of affecting their behavior. I mean, people in groups are affected differently. Everybody is. And I always feel that, if you were in a group for 6 months or a year and you weren't that close to the guru and some of the beliefs of the group were helpful for you, that wasn't necessarily a negative experience. But if you were like me, in the close group of people that were abused and exploited, then it was very harmful. And most people are in between. But it really is individual. And just because you're not addicted to something doesn't mean you're in a healthy situation and you're living a full life. I feel that the cult provides external control over people who maybe can't manage their own lives. I agree with that. But there's a price they pay. And groups tend to get worse over time, in my opinion, because sociopaths run them and they will crumble as they age and make mistakes that they never acknowledge. And, it's a tough situation. I think they're not freely people don't freely choose cults. People join organizations that make sense to them, that meet emotional needs, psychological needs, things like that, spiritual needs. So I hesitate to say that people are benefiting from a cult. I think there's degrees of benefits and degrees of harm. And of course, if someone else is being harmed, that's critical, like children, for instance. But I also think they're not healthy environments long-term in general. And people need to have free will to choose and to leave, which in most cult systems you don't have.
So we had a case where a family was very concerned about this phone. He was a member of the Hare Krishnas, and he wasn't living with the Krishnas, but he had been a member. And they determined that he had some mental illness. They thought that the Krishnas had driven him crazy. He was hiding in a closet. And so we began doing an assessment. And part of that assessment and the preparation with the mom, we realized that it probably had nothing to do with the Krishnas. It had a lot to do with a long history of mental illness. Mom had put it in the basket of cults, and we were concerned about this young man's mental health. So because we were in these open environments, I reached out to Anudama. I asked Anudama if we could talk about this case. Could he help us facilitate this young man going into psychiatric care? And Anudama immediately said, yes. And he did his own background check within the organization and found out the difficulties the young man had had, and that it was very important. So we found a therapist that we're both friends with, who happens to be a Catholic monk, who is a psychotherapist, and we moved this with Anonymous help. The young man was willing to go talk to this therapist, and it was fully just for his mental health. So the group was not really the problem, but it was what was presented to us at the start of this. And so I thank him all the time for what he did in helping that young man seek the proper help that he needed. We were not the venue for that. We were the venue for discovering the problem, not the solution.
And that speaks to the ethical piece again. You know, that they make sure that the person gets to the right resource.
That's where alliances become important, that we can talk across worldviews, and look at the situation as it is, as opposed to what people initially come to us with. We have to be able to sort all that out.
It's never just the cult problem. Actually, it's never just the cult problem. It's just how big is the cult problem compared to the family problem, compared to the mental health problem, compared to the addiction problem, whatever. It's always.
Okay, for those who think that we may be soft on the subject, I was in a group for 10 years. I sued the group in federal court. I mean, I've been on every TV show there was about the group. I'm not concerned about groups, but I also know that having been in this field for 43 years, I've seen the cases that have occurred that were not appropriate and the results were not good. And when a family puts everything in the cold basket, it may be right, it might be accurate, it may not be accurate. And by doing a collaborative approach, we can assess it to the best of our ability. There's obviously things we won't know.
I would like to say something on behalf of families. My experience has been that families are willing to go into family therapy. They do seem to be, once they understand that you're not the cause, but you may be doing things that contributed, if we put it a certain way. And I've had good luck with having people go into family therapy and recognize that, and they want to do their best for the person and for their family. So, I mean, they've already invested a lot of money, a lot of time, and they want to continue. So
That depends, one little nuance here, on the situation, because a group could use coercive control and you would want to educate them about that. And the group could also not have used coercive control of this person because their level of involvement. So we're gonna deliver what we think is important, and then give a syllabus of things that maybe you want to pursue in psychoeducation, with the therapist, with recovery specialists. We recognize that we can have a very large influence. We're in a power position in some sense, and we have to be very mindful of that. Because we could steer people very easily in many different directions, as we can with families who are concerned. So if they call us, we have a reputation around the world. They know who we are. And if we say this is that, here's the problem, we can steer people. And it would be financially would move us to do that, but it's just not ethical. We really, and it's not right. It's not just not ethical. It's just not right. We want to understand the situation.
Well, by the at the end, like does the people kind of have a better understanding of what they got?
It's
Part of it. Yeah. Yes.
It's part of what they do. They educate during the process of what to expect. And then, for instance, if I was on the case with them, they would probably encourage the client to do therapy with me if like we lived in the same town or something. But it would be when that client was ready. But we would prepare them, and that's the last part about cult recovery, about what it looks like and how to be supportive of that person, but not so directive. And I mean, my comment is get out of the way and let the cult survivor decide. And so I would encourage the family to do it that way. And then when the cult member's ready, if they choose to do therapy with me or with someone else, that's fine. But they need support, and they'll choose.
Additionally, we're over time, so and a little bit of people talking.
So
The research is that, and not our method, but in prior methods of exit counseling, which probably had about a 50 or 60% success rate of someone leaving the group, if you define that as success. Other families that don't always determine that's what success is, they might want to just have a relationship with their loved one. But those people who went through an exit counseling that went to Wellspring, the rehab center that existed, only 10% ever rejoined a group. Now, at Wellspring, there was an extensive curriculum on control and those things.
Influence. Lifton, Dr. Lifton, Dr. Singer, and
Cialdini's.
Chaldean's
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
It was a good program.
Excellent program. Joe and I, when we're working together on intervention, on average, it's with the person who's in the group, we may spend 10 hours over a number of days. Whereas in the past, I might spend 10 days at 12 hours a day because I would spend a lot of time talking about talking and not getting anywhere because we just talk. I don't want to talk, but I don't want to talk. We'd be talking about talking. So we don't want to talk about talking. We want to take the time that we're with that person and have it to be meaningful. People call these things all kinds of things. Abusive groups, but kids at a cult,
environment,
toxic environment.
intentional environment. Different countries have different
Term?
In Australia, I think it's intentional community. They use. I mean, personally tend. We talked about using the word cult. That can really be a barrier to people. I tend to use coercive control or abuse in the environment or toxic environment. People see, I don't know, my experience. And what I'll often say is a toxic environment, AKA cult, like if I'm writing something so that, it kind of, I think people gravitate towards certain terms better than others.
So our website is called mediation. So
Yeah.
Look, the label is not important to me. It's just not. What's important to me is that what elements of influence are being used. So I might pull something from Dr. Cialdini's theory. I might pull a piece from Lifton's theory. I might pull a piece from Singer's theory, or many theories to put together all of these influence techniques that together is what's happening to you. Not that I'm buying the theory. Theories are theories, but those theories are made up of concepts. And those concepts can be very valuable.
So their approach is very individual, focused on the family and the individual that's cult involved, which is probably what's unique about it. But that's why they're so successful, because they really spend the time to look at what's happening and look at it from several perspectives and have a team of professionals that can continue to communicate about what we're seeing and what we're experiencing so that we're as close to reality as possible. So it's a very individual, like the way therapy is very individual. This is very individual approach.
So I when I first started doing this, I remember working with a person. Her name is Mary Alice, and Mary Alice was from Tennessee, and her approach to intervention, she had been deprogrammed by Ted Patrick, was to come in with a picture of herself, and she said, "Hi, my name is Mary Alice, and I'm here to get you thinking. See, you're in a cult. And see this picture? This was me before I joined the cult. And this is my picture 2 months after I joined the cult. See how different I am? So let me tell you what a cult is. You're in one." So it was convincing someone. So, she had some, people would leave. a percentage of people, and some people would not leave, and some people would be very angry as a result of that and cut off relationships with their families. So, in a cult, not a cult, that's not what's important. It's what can we figure out
Nuance.
with that person. Well, techniques of manipulation as or maybe a helpful term. Techniques of manipulation, and so if you look at Cialdini's work, he talks about scarcity as a method of manipulating someone. Reciprocity. These are all things that exist in society. Are they applicable to this particular person is another story. And so what we want to find out is what's applicable to them, not what's applicable to the spending time on the big model. There's some philosopher that talks about, and it's right back on. I wish I had it with me. It's what most people think about, like a word like cult. It's what everybody means when you say that. You know, we don't have to explain it. You all got an idea, but it's what I do when I'm writing about it. That's very precise. And so that's where you get into this, definitional issue. For practical purposes, people know what, this is an abusive situation is a cult. That's a very much of a shorthand, but it might not be accurate if you're writing about it because you have to be so specific.
Well, unassuming, try to maintain a good relationship, try to really open them up to my understanding of where they're at any given time. So having been involved in two different groups, my mind is always where I think their mind may be in order to reach them. What's the hooks? Trying to get at what the hooks are for them that attach them to a group and try to help them maybe undo some of those hooks.